Okay, ברשותכם אני מדברת באנגלית. Sorry about the English, that's what I was asked to do. So we're going to talk about the bread of affliction, matzah, and gluten intolerance. Personally, I'm a gluten intolerant person. I have a nephew who's a celiac, and this is a question every year. It's a question for him this year. He's actually, this is the first year after his bar mitzvah, and so it was a big question to us. I called my brother this week to ask him what exactly he's doing. And it's a question for a lot of people. And what's so interesting about this question, for me at least, is it's something that as the medical science continues to unfold, and it does literally, certainly monthly, if not even daily, different tshuvot have to be rewritten. So here's what we're going to do really quickly. We're going to talk about first the mitzvah of matzah, just to define it, understand it. Then we're going to talk about a few different paradigms, different types of people who can't eat regular matzah for whatever reason. And then we're going to go through different approaches of how they deal with them, and then we're going to sum it up a little bit. None of this is going to be practical halacha. If anyone has this problem, they should definitely, with their own specific problem, consult a halachic authority. That should be very clear. Okay, so the first thing is, back. No. Okay, so the first thing is, there we go. The mitzvah of matzah and Pesach. According to the Gemara, there's a little bit of a discussion whether the mitzvah of matzah and Pesach is still doraita, still from the Torah, or rather maybe it's derabanan nowadays that we don't, maybe it's a rabbinic mitzvah nowadays that we don't have the korban Pesach. But the halachic conclusion is that there is a positive mitzvah in the Torah to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach. It is an independent mitzvah that everyone over the age of bar bat mitzvah is chayav in. So that is the first thing. Next, we have the question of what is matzah? What is it made out of? Kadima. Okay, there we go. Next, the question is what can be used to make matzah. Now, according to the Shulchan Aruch, you can be yotzai with the 5 different types of grains that are enumerated in the Mishnah. And what are different grains? Wheat and barley and spelt and oats and chiffon, rye. But according to the Rema, it is preferable that really it's better to have wheat. Now there are 2 basic opinions on why it's better to have wheat. One basic opinion is it's better to have wheat because that was what the original matzahs were. So we do it, it's kind of a zecher, it's a minhag. The other opinion is actually there's something about the leavening process that wheat is really the only grain that properly leavens and becomes chametz, and therefore it's the only grain that we can properly use to make matzah also. This is a discussion that unfortunately we will not be able to get into, but it makes it a little bit more complicated because there are individual opinions that actually say matzah has to be made out of wheat. It can't work for anything else. Luckily, we are posek that even if maybe l'chatchila, according to the Rama, ideally matzah should be made with meat, still the general halachic consensus is any of the 5 grains can be used to make matzah. Now this will be important to us because one of the 5 grains possibly has an option to be grown without gluten. Now, this brings us to our problem. What is our problem? There are certain people who can't, shouldn't, or won't eat gluten. Who are our people here? So we have our first. This is Darren. Darren is a dieter. Okay? Now, Darren doesn't want to eat gluten. He's read on the internet how bad it is for you, and he's decided it bothers him a little bit, makes him bloated, and he doesn't want to eat gluten, so he pretty much doesn't eat gluten. He's a very disciplined person. That's Darren. Our next person that we have is Sila, the celiac. Sila, on the other hand, was told by her doctor she cannot eat gluten. Celiac is a disease that affects the cilia and the small intestine. It's due to certain antibodies and the way that your body processes food with gluten, it causes real damage to the small intestine that has side effects that could be anywhere from uncomfortable, could be nothing actually, but side effects that could be discomfort, mild discomfort to severe discomfort, that could include misabsorption of vitamins and minerals that are very important, specifically for growing children, but really for everyone. They found people with celiac who don't keep a gluten-free diet have issues with higher rates of certain types of cancers and also bone density issues. It can be a very serious problem for people like Sila over here. Our next person is Alon. Alon is anaphylactic. Alon will go into anaphylactic shock if he eats anything that has wheat in it, right? He'll need an EpiPen, he'll need to be rushed to the hospital, right? That's our Alon. Our next person after this is Gal. Gal is gluten intolerant. She doesn't have a diagnosis of celiac. Possibly she has celiac, it's unclear whether or not she does, but whenever she eats gluten, she gets severe pains. She's incapacitated for days on end. It takes her weeks to really get over anytime she's exposed to even small amounts of gluten. And finally, we have Leah. Leah has lupus. Now, Leah is one person, and we see Rivka here laughing in the audience because Rivka actually sent me a question of a friend of hers who had lupus and was told by the doctor she has to maintain a completely grain-free diet. This is basically the doctor's last-ditch effort to keep her off of chemotherapy to control her lupus. Lupus is an autoimmune disorder. It's incredibly difficult to treat. People suffer a lot. So Leah has lupus. In addition to not eating grains, there are other things she can't eat. She has a lot of questions on Seder night. And now our question is, what are these different people supposed to do? So now we have 3 different halachic approaches that I'd just like to explore with you quickly. The first is there an option aside from wheat matzah? So, number 1, for our people with wheat allergies, the option is spelt matzah. Spelt matzah has been around for a little bit while, and is this halachically acceptable according even the Ramah, in cases where someone has anaphylactic shock or it's dangerous for someone, he would accept that they should be eating spelt matzah, and also someone, the truth is, I have a friend who has rheumatoid arthritis, and she also has to maintain a wheat-free diet. Spelt is okay, so she has spelt matzah too. So this is fine, right? Our next is that we have some celiacs who are gluten intolerant, and those celiacs, there is an option of oat matzah. So what's the problem with oat matzah? Some modern scientific evidence questions whether our oats are the shibolet shu'al that is mentioned in the Mishnah. Maybe our oats actually don't qualify as proper for matzah. This is an opinion that was brought by Professor Yehuda Felix a few years ago. Very fortunately for most gluten-intolerant people, this opinion is rejected by the vast majority of poskim who say we have a 100-year tradition that our oats, what we call quaker, that is considered the shibolet shu'al it is in the Mishnah. We don't leave a minhag that we have in our hands. So the majority of poskim are very happy that there is an option right now for oat matzah. The production of oat matzah was problematic for years. It's been getting better and better for years. That is its own presentation on its own that we will not go into, but maybe another time. And now we have our other issues. We have our lupus and our some celiacs. So for lupus and some celiacs, there really is no kosher option. Maybe they can't even have oats for whatever reason. And now our question is, what do these people do? They don't have the option of spelt matzah. They don't have the option of oat matzah. What do these people do? So this brings us to the question of, what if performing a mitzvah makes me sick? Now, of course, it's important to decide what kind of mitzvah we have here. Here we've already decided this is a positive Torah mitzvah, a mitzvah aseh d'oraita. And so we have to see what kind of sick we're dealing with. And there are 3 basic kinds of sick. There's a few nuances, but 3 basic kinds of sick. The first is a sickness with a chance of mortal danger. Cholesh sheyesh bo sakana, or what's called even a safek sakana. Right? This is someone who eating matzah could lead to major problems and death, basically. There's even a small chance it could lead to their death, such as Alon or anaphylactic. Alon or anaphylactic definitely would not be able to have, if he's allergic to all sorts of grains for whatever reason, and this sent him into anaphylactic shock, he cannot have matzah, right? And that's same thing, the person with lupus, someone with epilepsy who's told to go on a grain-free diet and really doesn't have any other options. These are people who are in the category of sickness with the chance of mortal danger. Our next category that we have is sickness without the chance of mortal danger. And these, cholesh she'ein bo sakana. Now, who are cholim she'ein bo sakana here? So this is the question. Part of the question is, where does our celiac belong, right? So our celiac, according to some doctors, this would be someone who does have a chance of mortal danger. This affects the lining in their stomach. It could lead to greater incidence of cancer. And maybe this is someone who is in mortal danger. Other people say, no, one ingestion of gluten every once in a while, once a year, a small amount of gluten, a kazayit of matzah, isn't going to kill them, right? And so they say, no. And so it's really a question of where to put our celiac in, and this is something that you can see when you read the poskim, how seriously they take the celiac, how seriously, and what they do with that. Based on whether they think that this amount of grain is actually dangerous for a person. Now, in addition to our celiac, we have our gluten-intolerant person. Our gluten-intolerant person, to a certain degree, would really be considered a cholesh she'ein bo sakana, as opposed to Daron the dieter, right? Daron the dieter is on a not medically recommended diet. He's perhaps gluten-sensitive. A little bit of discomfort, but not a big deal. Whereas our gluten-intolerant person is what we would call halachically maybe nofel mishkav, someone who has to take to bed because they've ingested gluten. They're in bed for a few days. So that puts them in this cholesh she'ein bo sakana category, as opposed to someone who has just discomfort, michush. And these categories now, our question are, what to do with these people, what do they do? And here we have our halachic approaches to what to do with these people. The first approach is the Maharam Shik's approach. The Maharam Shik's approach says, in any case with a cholesh she'esh bo sakana, any case of someone who is in mortal danger, no matzah for you. They're not allowed any matzah whatsoever, even if there's a small chance of mortal danger. It possibly, if they were to decide that they would try eating matzah because maybe it'll be okay, it's possibly even what we call a mitzvah haba'al ba'avera, meaning they're doing, actually he says this is for sure, it's at least a mitzvah haba'al ba'avera. It means you're doing a mitzvah at the same time as you're doing a sin, such as someone who steals a lulav in order to shake the four species, right? This is something that's not allowed. It's a problem. But he says it's perhaps even more than that. Perhaps because you're exempt from this mitzvah, it's maybe even fully a sin and there's no mitzvah involved. When you're exempt from a mitzvah, you shouldn't be doing it at all. And you're not allowed to put your health in this kind of danger. And so he says, you're out. No matzah for you. Right? Now, obviously, we're talking here about the person who's not allowed any grain whatsoever. Someone who's allowed oat, they're fine. Right? Our second option is that person who has a sickness without a chance of mortal danger. Whether it's a danger to a limb, maybe the lining of their intestine, or maybe the issue is incapacitation of fellow mishkav, the Maharam Shik says in these situations, yes, matzah for you. If the negative effects don't appear immediately, it's still considered eating and you should still be having at least some amount of matzah. You're still obligated in the mitzvah. That's the Maharam Shik. So the Maharam Shik basically puts the majority of celiacs who don't have immediate reactions, which is the majority, puts them in the place of yes, they should be having matzah. Now, that's the Maharam Shik's approach, but there are a few other approaches which are significantly more lenient. One option is to learn matzah from the mitzvah of sukkah. In the mitzvah of sukkah, we have a rule of teishvu kein taduru, that you're supposed to sit in the sukkah the way that you live at home. And therefore, the halacha is that if someone is ill and their attendants, then they are exempt from the mitzvah of sukkah. And this is halacha according to many opinions, even for the first night of Sukkot, when you're really supposed to sit in the sukkah, eat in the sukkah, sleep in the sukkah. And the Shulchan Aruch continues and says that this is not just for those in mortal danger, but even for someone whose eyes hurt or their heads hurt, right? Meaning even for someone we're not talking about a level of michush of discomfort, we're talking about a level of someone who's, taken to bed, who's really not feeling well, they don't have to sit in the sukkah. And so this seems to be a case of a cholesh she'ein bo sakana. In the case of a cholesh she'ein bo sakana, someone who's not in mortal danger, according to this idea, maybe you would say that they wouldn't have to have matzah. Now, that is the opinion of the Chida. The Chida, the Berkei Yosef, says that we can learn from here that a cholesh she'ein bo sakana would possibly even be exempt from positive Torah mitzvot. And in this case, someone who gets severely sick from eating matzah, you could perhaps learn that they are exempt from matzah. There's a little bit of a problem with this though, and that is that matzah doesn't have the same rule as sukkah. We said already, sukkah is a mitzvah teishvukein to do. You're supposed to dwell in the sukkah the way that you dwell in your home. If you're sick, you're not going to go to the table. If you're sick, you're not going to be eating. As opposed to matzah has a slightly different status, and so it's possible that the chidah would not apply here. Next, we have another approach, which is learning from etrog. There's a halacha about etrogim. Once upon a time, etrogim were very expensive. People would have to spend a lot of money. And I don't know if you like to listen to shtetl stories growing up, but I certainly did. And I remember always hearing the stories about the whole town that got together to buy an etrog. And sometimes it was just too expensive and they couldn't even do that. And so two towns had to get together to buy an etrog. So the Ramah talks about this possibility that maybe someone doesn't have enough money to buy an etrog. How much should they have to spend? And he says you're not supposed to spend more than a fifth of your money to buy an etrog or really do any positive Torah commandments. And so, based on this idea, the Binyan Shlomo or Shlomo Vilna rules that since making yourself sick is even worse than spending a fifth of your money, meaning people would pay a lot of money to not get sick, but honestly, injury to your health is much worse than injury to your bank account, at least with people who have their priorities in order. So therefore, since making oneself sick is worse than spending money, someone who would get really sick from ingesting matzah would be exempt from a positive Torah commandment that would make them sick. And this would take care of our celiac and our gluten intolerance person. Someone who also can't tolerate oats wouldn't have to ingest even oat matzah if you go according to this opinion. Now, we have modern poskim who deal specifically with celiac. The first approach is brought by the Tzitz Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, and it's followed by Rabbi Van Yosef and of Tzvi Pesach Frank. They both say that you can rely on the exemption of the Binyan Shlomo if either the individual or their doctor say that the person will get very sick if ingesting matzah. Meaning, the individual can say for themselves, I can't do this, my body can't take this. It doesn't even need to go through their doctor. Obviously, you can also ask their doctor, and if their doctor says, you will get sick, do not eat matzah, they should be listening to their doctor, even if they think that they can stomach it. Right? You're actually machmir according to whichever one, similar to certain halachot about Yom Kippur and eating on Yom Kippur. Now, at the same time, he does say that if one wants to, they can choose to be stringent and eat matzah as long as there's not any chance of mortal danger. And in this case, they can even make the brachot. He does say that this person should eat a minimal kazayit. And we'll talk about what someone does when they eat a minimal kazayit in a moment. But the next thing that I want to talk about is the Hilkhata of Asher Weiss. Asher Weiss says, he adds in another category, which is danger to limb. He says, in addition to a chola sheyesh bo sakana, someone who's in mortal danger, there's also someone who's in danger of a limb. And this is a category that we talk about in Hilchot Shabbos sometimes when you're allowed to go to the hospital. And he mentions that in this case also, in the case of a celiac, since there is danger to that person's small intestine, and it's possible that it's even irreversible danger, in that case, that individual would definitely be exempt from the positive Torah commandments. So the difference between the Hilkhata Asher and Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg is that if your doctor tells you that eating even a little bit of gluten could have irreversible damage on your small intestine, then guess what? According to Rav Asher Weiss, you cannot eat matzah. According to the Tzitz Eliezer, possibly you can. Now, in cases of someone who's gluten intolerant, who, like we said, is a chola she'ein bo sakana, but gets incapacitated, so this person is also not obligated to eat matzah, but they may choose to do so and recite a blessing, and this may be considered some type of midat chasidut, some type of level of piety. And in the case of tzara ba'alma, Darren or dieter, someone who gets a little bit of discomfort, so they should be pushing themselves to eat matzah. Now, and this brings us to our summary. We have first Darren the dieter. Darren the dieter, like we said, according to basically all opinions, should be eating matzah. If he really has an issue, he can consult with halachic authorities about smaller portion, possibly having spelt or oat or something like that. Next, Silar celiac, she should eat oat matzah. as long as she can stomach it. If she can't, that's also talking to a halachic authority, talking to her doctor about it, and she can discuss eating smaller portions with the doctor and the halachic authority. So for people who have problems with oat matzah, generally what they do, just halacha l'maaseh, is they will eat 1 kazayit of matzah. If you're going to eat 1 kazayit of matzah, it's brought in the Shulchan Aruch and it's brought later by a number of poskim that you should actually save that kazayit of matzah for afikomen, because this way you're not only performing the mitzvah of motzi matzah, but you're also having the mitzvah of afikomen. And so in the beginning you should have this in mind. You shouldn't wash, you should wait until the end, and you should have your matzah, your 1 kazayit of matzah for afikomen. This is anyone who has to only have 1 kazayit of matzah. Now next, alon anaphylactic, he eats spelt matzah. It's actually pretty easy. I've never met anyone who's anaphylactic to all 5 grains. If you know them, I'd love to meet them. And then we have valid gluten intolerance, and really based on the last opinion that we saw with Asher Weiss, you can even say that she can eat oat matzah and also discuss eating smaller portions with a halachic authority and a doctor. And you might even put her in the same category as tzila or celiac. That's based on Rav Asher Weiss's opinion. And finally, we have Leah, who has lupus. And for Leah, if the doctor says no grains, she has to refrain from eating all matzah. But possibly, and this is where we should add in, that really matzah is not just a part of what we eat on Pesach. It's a prop that we use to tell the story of Magid. We're supposed to wait to tell Magid b'sha'ah sheyesh matzot u'morim munachim lefanecha, when matzah and maror is before you on the table. And so even if we had an entire family that for some reason would not be allowed to eat matzah, they should probably still have matzot sitting on the table, waving them up, pointing to them, picking them up. When Rabbi Akiva tells us we're supposed to pick them up, Rabbi Gamliel tells us we're supposed to pick them up, because matzah is an essential part of our Seder. And so, thank God that there's so many people who are working to make sure that within the bounds of halacha, and within the bounds of what is medically advisable, there are people who are able to partake of matzah and to do this incredibly important mitzvah every year.